I have the pleasure of introducing Amherst County Public Schools. Ms. Hollie Jennings and Stephanie Moehlenkamp are going to share with us some very non-traditional ways of caring for students. So please give them your attention and please welcome them.
Good morning. I'm tall, so I have to adjust this a little bit. If I knew I would be standing, I would have wore flats. So thank you very much for having us. I want to thank Paula for inviting Stephanie and I. That kind of happened in a conversation over the phone, and we're talking about what we've been doing in Amherst County, and Paula said, we need you to come to Florida. I said, okay, all right. You guys are going to have to bear with me. I'm going to have to look at my notes just to keep me on track, because I get very passionate about what we've done in Amherst County, and we'll all miss our flights, and we'll be here past lunchtime if I don't look down at my notes. So just kind of bear with me through that. We left our PowerPoint very simple intentionally, because I want you to hear more of our story and what we've done, as opposed to a lot of things written, because I get distracted. I'm one of those people at a conference. If you give me something to read and talk to me at the same time, I'm probably going to read what you gave me and not hear a thing you said. So we are a small rural school division in Virginia. And when I say small, we have 473 square miles that 35,000 people occupy. So just to kind of give you an idea so you can get a picture in your head, Fort Lauderdale is 36 square miles. We are 473 square miles. Fort Lauderdale and its 36 square miles has almost 200,000 people living here. We have 35,000 people living in 473 square miles. So we are very spread out. We have mountains, we have rivers, we have lakes, we have cows, we have manufacturing facilities, we're very rural. Our school system is comprised of a little over 4,000 students. We have 10 schools. We have one high school for our whole division. So the high school is considered medium-sized in our state because it is the only high school in our division. We are not a very diverse community. About 60% of our students are white, 23% are black, 7% are categorized as 2 or more races, less than 1% Hispanic, and less than 1% American Indian. So we are not a very diverse school division. Even though about 20, almost 30% of our population are people of color, less than 6% of our faculty and staff are people of color. So that is something that we've looked at as a school division that we need to work on going forward. But what I'm here to talk about today is what got us to the point where we started looking at some of these things and wanting to make some changes. Our school division was not looking at much of anything through an equity lens unless it was required. So unless it was a gap group that we were required to look at through federal accreditation and testing, it's not a lens that we were looking through at all. And we have moved from doing what was required to doing what is right. And the way that happened is the Office of Civil Rights entered into our life. And normally when you say OCR, you get lots of different responses, and usually none of them are good. But I can tell you that the Office of Civil Rights, when they came into Amherst County, we entered into a voluntary agreement due to the response to a discipline incident that happened at our high school. And the Office of Civil Rights then kind of looked at all of our data to say, let's see what's going on in Amherst County. And what was going on in Amherst County was not good for students. It was not good for our community, our families, our kids. It wasn't good for anybody. At that time in Amherst County, I oversaw discipline, attendance, truancy. I assisted our homeless students. I'm the homeless liaison. When you work in a small school division, you wear multiple hats and you do lots of different things. And because I was the person who oversaw discipline and the OCR complaint was related to discipline and everyone else kind of didn't want to have anything to do with that at the time, they handed that project to me. So we had about 17 pages from the Office of Civil Rights of things that they wanted us to work on in our school division. And I thought, okay, where do we get started? The first thing that we did was we kind of got a team of people together at the division level and started to kind of go through the agreement and look at, okay, what is it that we need to do? And we thought, okay, do we just want to comply with the Office of Civil Rights, or do we want to do what's right? And fortunately, I work in a school division with people who wanted to do what was right. So we decided we're not going to just go for compliance, we're going to go for a change of culture, and that's where we started. And so as I go through this, I'm going to give you the lessons that I learned through this process, and it's around 6 of them. And the first lesson that I learned is that apathy is not your friend. I've been a high school administrator, and as a high school administrator, you think apathy is your friend because you don't have any parents calling you that are mad. Everything's kind of going along great. Your students are happy, your parents are happy. But are they happy because you're doing a good job, or are they happy because they don't care? And I can tell you, when people are apathetic about what's going on in your community, things that you wouldn't want going on in your community happen. So you need mad people. You need people who are mad. So the next time, if you work in a school division, or if you're in an agency, or if you work at the state level, if you have someone who's calling you and they're mad, embrace that. Because mad people are the way things that change. If you don't have any mad people, you're going to have status quo. And you do not want status quo, because that's what we had in our division. We weren't looking at anything through an equity lens until someone got mad and called the Office of Civil Rights. And today, 5 years later, we're so thankful that they did. So as we looked at whether we want this to be compliance or culture, there were 3 areas that we kind of focused on. The first was our policy and our practices. At that time, our school administrators, not one of them had a progressive discipline chart. We did not have a discipline matrix. It was kind of a kid came in your office and you gave them what you thought was appropriate for that discipline incident. And looking back, I think that's crazy. Why in the world were we doing that? I had worked in another school division as a school administrator, and we did have a progressive discipline chart. I was fortunate enough to be trained by someone who had been doing that job for a long time and wanted to make sure we were being fair and equitable. And so I had that experience, and I kept saying, we need to make sure we have a progressive discipline chart. We need to make sure everyone is doing the same thing. So it doesn't matter if Holly is in the principal's office or if someone else of another color is in the principal's office, they're getting the same consequence for the same infraction. So we kind of started to look at our policies and our practices. Then we started to look at the heart of our staff. So we looked at the referrals that were coming to the office. Because one part of it is what do we do when the kid gets to the office, the other part of it is who is being referred to the office and why are they being referred to the office. So we started to kind of look at implicit bias and going down that road with our staff. And then we looked, okay, what are we doing to support our students? Are we just suspending kids? And the answer was yes, we were suspending kids because that is I empathize with a lot of the folks in the room that have talked about working on doctorate degrees. I'm currently in my dissertation year, and my dissertation is around this area. And out-of-school suspension and in-school suspension and exclusionary discipline practices are still the #1 go-to for schools when they're applying consequences. And that's what we did. And so we started to think about, okay, what can we do instead of suspensions? What can we do instead of kicking kids out of school? Because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but suspensions were never created to help the kid that was being suspended. Suspensions were created for the people in the school that needed a break from the kid that was getting suspended. And so if suspensions worked, when kids were suspended, they wouldn't get suspended again. And kids keep getting suspended. And so we had to think of other things to do. Going back briefly to talking about looking at the heart of our staff, that's where my second lesson came in. I started to get frustrated because I thought everybody should feel and believe the same thing I do. Everybody should believe that every kid, no matter who you are, should receive the same education, the same consequence for discipline, but not everybody believed that. And I know that's hard for you guys to believe, but not everybody believed that. So my second lesson was, in order to continue to do this job, I had to learn that it's not what you believe, it's what you do. Because not everybody was going to believe what I believed, but they were going to do what the expectations were that we were putting out. Otherwise, Amherst County might not be the place they wanted to continue to work, because we were going to start doing work differently, and we were going to start holding people accountable for doing that work differently. So if you don't believe what I believe, that's fine, as long as you're doing the expectations we're putting into place. And what you find is, over time, the people who don't believe what you believe find somewhere else to work. And you end up with staff who are dedicated to doing the mission and vision that you've put into place. And that is what you want for students. So instead of wearing myself out trying to preach the message and getting people to believe what I believe, I just said, you know what? As long as they're doing what we're supposed to do, I don't care what they believe anymore. So we moved to a systems thinking process, where we revised policies and we were making sure they were being implemented consistently. And that's part of the, I don't care what you believe as long as you do what you're supposed to do. You put policies in place across the school division. So if we have 2 middle schools, in both middle schools, no matter who you are, if it's your first offense to the office for getting into a fight, that you're going to receive the exact same consequence as someone at the other middle school who got into a fight for their first time. And we trained administrators on how to implement those new practices, and we monitored the data to make sure that it was happening. So that's where we got started. The next thing we did, like any good researcher, we came up with a survey, and we surveyed everybody. We surveyed the students, we surveyed the parents, we surveyed the faculty and staff at our high school, because we needed to know, where do we start? So we see these issues are happening, but we kind of need to know what exactly is going on in the school. And what I will say about surveys, when I say, what are you surveying? Don't be afraid to ask questions about race, because people don't want to ask questions about race. Because what they say is, well, if we ask that question, then that's going to make people mad. Well, you need mad people. You need people to be mad, because if things are wrong, people should be mad. And if they're not mad, then that's also a problem. And so we asked very good questions in our surveys. And then we got some numbers back. And we were shocked by some of them. The 3 things that I was most surprised by were that students felt bullied. Now, why does that surprise me? I oversee discipline. I am a data person. I'm a kindred spirit with the data spice in the room, because I love data. I'm one of those people that play with data all the time to see what it's telling me. So I was very surprised when the students said they felt bullied, because we did not have not one incident, in the previous 3 years documented of a bullying incident at our high school. No one had received discipline for bullying in the previous 3 years, but I have a lot of students saying they feel bullied. So that didn't make sense to me. That is data contradicting itself. So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? The next thing that we heard were that teachers weren't fair. That surprised me. You want to know why that surprised me? Because in the teacher survey that asked very similar questions as the student survey, all the teachers felt like they were fair. So I'm like, okay, that's data that's not matching each other. And then the really big part that really surprised me was that listen to this, less than 50% of the students in the school felt safe. Less than 50%. And I was floored, because it's not a school that has a lot of fights. We don't have gangs. We're out in the country. We have cows. We didn't have a whole lot of drug incidents. Every once in a while someone got caught with marijuana. It was not a lot of, we never have weapons incidents. It was not a school that had some of those indicators that you read about for it being a dangerous school. So we were very surprised when we got that data. So that would be my next lesson for you. That would be lesson number 3. Numbers only tell you part of the story. And I know for the data spice people in the room like me, That's a hard pill to swallow, because when you look at numbers, they can tell you a lot of different things, and they sometimes will tell a story that someone is trying to present, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So if we had stopped there, with students not feeling safe and everybody being bullied, if we had just stopped there, we would have been implementing plans to increase school safety. We would have been implementing plans to do bullying prevention programs. That's what we would have been putting locks at the doors and people getting scanned when they come in, and more school resource officers, because the data told us that less than half the school didn't feel safe. So the next thing that we did was we held student forums. The format that we did that was we had every single kid in the school, and our high school has about 1,400 kids because it's the only high school in our division. And we had them come in small groups. It took a full week. It took the principal and I sitting in with the kids all day long for 7 periods a day, asking them questions, asking them if they felt like their school was a fair place. Why did they not feel it was safe? Follow-up questions from the survey. We wrote down every response. We also handed out cards to the students in the room in case they did not feel comfortable sharing their responses out loud, because teenagers are funny like that. So they would write their answers on the cards. And we collected all of this information and we went through it. And we learned a lesson. So what we learned about bullying was that it was very covert. It was non-observable behaviors that was happening. It gave us an understanding that in the school there was this underculture that we as adults could not observe and would have never known about had we not asked our students what is going on in the school. And they told us there were racial tensions in the school. There were conflicts we knew nothing about in the school. There was conflicts between athletes and non-athletes. There was conflicts between upperclassmen and lowerclassmen. And it was done in ways that adults in the building would not have known what was going on. So that's the first lesson we learned. The second lesson we learned about teachers not being fair. In every single forum that we held, every day of the week, 7 periods a day, there was at least one person that would speak up and say, my teacher's not fair. And we said, give us an example. We want to know what you're talking about. Well, for example, we're not allowed to have food in the classroom. But Holly can come in and open up a bag of chips and enjoy her bag of chips. But if I walk in the room and unwrap a piece of gum, I'm getting sent to the office. And we heard that over and over and over and over and over again. And typically the person that was telling me that was a male student of color in every single forum. And so we started to realize something's going on here. Intentional, non-intentional, implicit, something's going on. And we need to look at that, and we need to do training around that, and we need to embrace that. And I will say to you that when we first got into our OCR agreement, people get defensive. And they're like, well, we're not, we're just doing discipline like, we're not treating anybody different. And I said, but if you look at the way the data's pulled, we pulled just first-time offenses. And we look at black students compared to white students for their very first time in the office for the exact same offense, so that you're comparing the same thing. For my data spices in the room, you're comparing the same thing. And black students are getting suspended more frequently and for longer periods of time. That's something you got to look at. That there's something wrong here. We've got to fix this. And then when we talk to students, and over and over and over again, they say our teachers aren't being consistent with applying policy in the classroom, that's something we've got to talk about. And people, when they're defensive, like to shift blame back on to other folks. And when you have these conversations, you'll have folks say, well, tell me who the kids are. Tell me who they are. Which one complained about the potato chips? Which ones are getting suspended? Because they want to justify why I chose to behave that particular way with that particular student. But that's not the answer. That's never the answer. So then the last thing when we talk about not being safe is we found out that the students in the school were not feeling safe because of incidents that were happening outside of the school. So this was the year that the San Bernardino, California shooting happened. And we have so I will tell you this, I meant to mention this earlier. Paul had talked about the deadly riots in Charlottesville. We are about 50 miles south of Charlottesville. And we are also next to Lynchburg, Virginia, which there's the largest Christian university there, which you guys may have heard about in the national news from time to time. The president of the university at that time had come on to the news and made a statement that was across national headlines that he wanted all of his students at the university, it's about 40,000 kids, to carry concealed weapons so that they could shoot Muslims. And what we learned about in our forums, and we heard kids say it over and over and over again, was that we live really close to there. There's going to be a lot of people carrying guns. What happens if the people they were talking about get mad and they come here and do something because this person said that they should shoot these group of people? What happens if someone comes to our school and tries to shoot our school? What happens if we have a bomb threat and we have to go outside and the people are mad and they come here and they bomb our school while we're all outside in the stadium during an evacuation? Our front doors are glass. What happens if somebody shoots through the glass? We heard this over and over, and we realized that our kids needed some support. They needed some clarification about the things they were hearing in the news. They needed some clarification about what was happening in our country. They needed to have conversations about what we were doing to keep them safe in their school. And so that we started that process as well. And our principal at the time was really great about that. He had served in the military. He had been deployed 3 different times to other parts of the world where groups of people that were being talked about in the news that he had lived with daily and interacted with daily, and could give stories and examples and talk about his personal experience that made our kids so much more comfortable. And talking about those things is what helped our school to improve. And if we had never had that conversation, we would have been building metal detectors and putting up more doors. And that's not what needed to happen. We needed to talk to our kids about what was going on in the world and how we were keeping them safe. That's what we needed to talk about. And if we never held those forums, we would not know that. So that was lesson number 4. Those impacted needed to be the ones solving the problem. And going forward, what we did is we got suggestions from the kids, from the forums, about what they needed to feel safe, what they needed to feel less bullied, what they needed to feel better relationships with their teachers. And we developed both short-term and long-term plans based on those responses, and we're continuing to implement them. Just this year, so this was 5 years ago, just this year, we are designing a new entry system into the buildings, all of our buildings in our whole division, so that the kids feel safer, because they mention that frequently. And so that was born out of those student forums. Student voice is the reason why hundreds of thousands of dollars are being spent in our school division to make our schools feel safer for our students. So then our next step was, once we learned all of this information, we had to start doing some trainings. And who did we train? We trained everybody. We trained everybody. I'm talking, we did trainings with bus drivers and cafeteria workers and teachers and students and principals. And we did training on policy, how to implement policy, what consistent policy looked like. We had to talk about getting rid of vague, and someone mentioned it yesterday, what is disrespect? Well, disrespect to me is very different maybe than disrespect to someone else. So we had to develop common language in our schools about what does respect mean. We did trainings on implicit bias. We did trainings on respect. And my last question was, why is it important and did it matter? Well, why is it important goes back to our very first slide. Are we wanting to be in compliance, or are we wanting to change culture? And we really, truly wanted to change the culture of our school division. And we felt like continuing to do the trainings is what helped us to do that. So that was my lesson number 5. What you're intentional about is what gets done. So don't say that you're about equity if no one looks at equity. And don't say that you're about being fair to all students if you're not talking to students to find out if they feel like it's fair. And so We are now out of our OCR agreement. We were released, and we fully complied. But part of what we did going forward was we developed a strategic plan that has its own section on equity. Equity is the thread that we do everything else through. And so even though we're out of our OCR agreement, we developed our own, we wrote our own agreement, because we now want to be very intentional about monitoring what it is that we're doing and making sure that we're being fair and equitable and keeping this on the forefront to make sure that this does not happen in our division again. Even though we're this small little itty bitty country school division that's predominantly white out in the middle of nowhere, we want to do what's right. And I'm really super thankful for all of the administrators in our school division who embraced what we were doing, instead of pushed back. Because if you have people pushing back, you're going to get there, because really it doesn't matter what they believe, it only matters what they're doing. And eventually, if you don't believe what the division believes, you're not going to want to work there anymore, because it's going to make what you're doing really hard on you. And so we have a team of people who are doing the right thing, and we're really proud of that. So just briefly, practices that we put into place: we entered into the Virginia tiered systems of support so that we could put multiple levels of support in place. We started developing behavior plans that actually supported students. How many of you have seen plans that people develop that support the school and not the student? Yeah, through IEPs and behavior plans. I've seen plans that I thought, this does not benefit the kid at all. And so we really started working on behavior plans that supported our students and helped them be more successful. We also developed an equity council that had representation from all of our schools, had parents involved, had community members involved, and they are the ones that developed the equity portion of our strategic plan. The other thing that I'm probably the most proud of, since I started this work, I've been there in Amherst County, and I'm from Amherst County, grew up in Amherst County, went to high school in Amherst County. My supervisor was my track coach in high school, so I mean, that's how small of a school division we are. The thing I'm most proud of is that I have been working on this for a long time, and we put it into place last year, about midway through the school year. We now have an alternative suspension center. So instead of sending kids home to do who knows what for 3, 7, 10 days at a time, they are now at our alternative suspension center receiving counseling services, keeping up with their schoolwork, getting support around the reasons why that they are there. We ran the data at the end of the year last year of the students that were sent there. Only about 25% of the students returned to the alternative suspension center. So that shows me that that works a lot better than suspending kids out of school. And the kids that were coming back, I know this is going to shock the high school administrators or school administrators in the room. The kids that were coming back, that were kids that were getting caught for vaping. Vaping, the electronic cigarettes, that's a national issue right now. And it doesn't help that they're getting marketed to smoking devices that look like flash drives you put in your computer, pens that you write with. I think those are being targeted directly at kids, but I won't get on that soapbox today. But those are the kids that are continuing to return. To me, that's an addiction issue, and we're working on developing programs around that. So we are continuing to do a lot of good things going forward. Part of our other good thing going forward is that last year we hired Ms. Stephanie Moehlenkamp, and I'm going to turn the mic over to her in just a second. And she has a background and expertise in taking care of kids through social emotional learning and trauma-informed care that has been such an asset to our school division. We've already had folks trained, and I don't want to say too much because I'm probably going to butt into what she's doing. But she's had trainers come and train our entire school division on trauma-informed practices, as well as Dewey Cornell from UVA on threat assessments and how to respond to threat assessments. He is not a believer of kicking kids out of school. So a lot of good things happening. But that takes me to my last lesson. That would be lesson number 6. And I know you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir. If you do this work, you will lose friends, and you're going to face adversarial situations. And you will get mad yourself. But remember, you need mad people. Even if you're the only mad person in the room, you need mad people. Because if nobody's mad, you got an even bigger problem. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Self-care is important. And the type of self-care I'm talking about is coming to events like this where you feel supported and encouraged, because oftentimes when you do this work, you're the only person in your division maybe doing this work. And you don't feel like you have other people that have shared experiences. So I'm very thankful for Paula for inviting us. I appreciate my friend Valerie from Florida in the back of the room. She was speaking truth and encouragement to me yesterday that was super beneficial to me. And I feel like, okay, there are other people in much larger divisions that face the same type of experiences that I'm facing. My friends over here from Arkansas, it's just been very uplifting to have the support of other people that are doing the same work. So I appreciate you, and I'm going to give Stephanie the mic.
It's such an honor to be standing in front of you. Do you mind if I hold the mic? I want to be brief because I think we're over time, but just wanted to share some things that we're trying to put into place in our county to do what's best for every child every day. If you see in that left-hand corner, that's our motto, and we're trying to live that out in what we do. So for social and emotional learning for our students at the elementary level, all of our school counselors were trained by Sanford Harmony, not only to implement social emotional learning, this curriculum, but also they were trained as trainers so that we're building capacity and moving forward where we can add more in the curriculum. So they are also, our elementary school counselors are using a curriculum called Zones of Regulation, which helps students understand the emotions they're feeling, but also recognize emotions in others, and then how they respond to their own and to others. At the middle school level, one of our two middle schools, that school counselor is using the Random Acts of Kindness free curriculum. It's free online to implement in that middle school. Trauma-informed care is a big passion of mine, as Holly was speaking to. In March of this year, our Amherst Trauma-Informed Care Network held a kickoff event, invited community members, and around 100 people showed up, which was huge for us. And it's all about different organizations coming together and doing what's best for our kids and our families. So really excited about this and moving forward with it. To begin our school year in Amherst County Public Schools, we screened Resilience. I don't know if you're familiar with that documentary. If you aren't, check it out. It's all about adverse childhood experiences that study what was learned about brain development that is different in kids who experience traumatic events, and then how we respond to that and how we can do things a little differently to do what's best for every kid. And so after we screened that, each school was charged with coming up with some kind of plan for building relationships during the school year. Relationships with their students, relationships with the parents and community, relationships with each other. On election day, all of our staff will be trained on Trauma 101 to give them some more tools to help them be able to help our kids. And several key staff will be trained as trainers so that moving forward, again, we're building capacity so that we can give people what they need. Mental health. When we talk about mental health, we all have mental health. It's part of our whole person, right? It's part of all of our health. And so it's very important for us to remove stigma, and in a rural community like what Holly was describing, where we have this large area and very few people in it, we have some difficulties, some barriers. Accessibility. Sometimes transportation is an issue. People are not able to get out to get to treatment. Sometimes it's a problem of availability of providers. We have a limited number of providers in our county. We are close to Lynchburg City, but for the northern end of the county, that can be a very, very big barrier in getting to someone to provide them with mental health treatment. And also the acceptability is a barrier. So it's not okay to not be okay, right? And so I'm just going to pretend I'm okay and not tell anyone. And so suicide prevention is very important. Olivia spoke about this and was passionate, and I'm with you. So impressed by you. Thank you for the work you're doing. So we are working on adopting curriculum and also looking at policy with regards to suicide prevention, but we also understand when we're looking at the whole child and making sure that basic needs are met, even things as simple as that can help prevent suicide, because when you have the things you need, it's less stressful, right? We're also looking at a mental health curriculum, and one of the things that is coming out of the strategic plan in our county is that we're going to develop a division mental health team, which will hopefully help in this process of adopting this mental health curriculum. If you're not familiar with the National Center for School Mental Health out of the University of Maryland, there are a lot of free resources. The SHAPE system is a way for you to assess where your division is, and then there's a whole school mental health curriculum that's available as well through them. So check it out. That's what we're working on. Yes. So the National Center for School Mental Health out of the University of Maryland, and they also have the SHAPE system, and you can get to that by theshapesystem.com, literally. As Holly spoke to, I think a big piece here also is that when we're working with students and families who have experienced trauma, we have to keep in mind that we need to take care of our staff too and help them practice self-care and give them ways to do so. So that's something else we're looking at. Holly also mentioned we went through a training. We developed division threat assessment team, school threat assessment teams. We trained everyone with Dewey Cornell. He came to us and trained us. He's amazing, and it's a great model. And in our school counseling program, we didn't have a vision or mission when I came in, so we didn't know who we were, what we were about, or where we were going. So we worked hard last year to define that, what our program was about and where we're headed. And it's all about doing what's best for our kids and making sure they're prepared for their futures. And we also, if you're not familiar, the American School Counselor Association has a whole model for school counseling programs, and so we adopted those mindsets and beliefs as our framework that we're going to work under. And I just had a closing thought, reflection from our time together. I learned about an African philosophy in the summer of 2018 when I took some youth to a conference, and the theme of the conference was Lift Every Voice. And there's a great song with that same title. Check it out. But the philosophy is Ubuntu, and it is I am because we are. So thank you for the work you are doing. We are better together. We are connected, and we are community. Thank you.
Short person comes back to the mic. It's okay. I just have to reflect very briefly that Stephanie mentioned the song Lift Every Voice, and it's a great song. You should check it out if you know it. And we were like, that's right. I mean, that I'm finally in a space where I'm like, oh, the people in this room know that song. We know that song. That's our song. But no, I thank you. I thank you all of these wonderful warriors for equity, the Gadflies, the Equity Guy, hashtag Equity Gadfly, for being with us today and sharing your stories and the work that you're doing, and that you know is a continual process. It is not a check mark. It is not a, oh, we're done, we finished, now on to the next thing. This is something that we have to continue for the rest of our lives. Something we say at IDRA is that we want to work ourselves out of a job, and that was established 46 years ago, and here we still are. And it feels like sometimes the same space. So we have time for a few questions. If you have any, I will say this, if the ladies are open to it, we can post online the PowerPoint presentations with contact information. And then for those of you who are a part of the convening in the community of practice, and actually people can join the community of practice, we can put that information up and we can continue this conversation because we're not done. We're definitely not done. And do we have any questions right now?
If I could have the folks that have a question come over here so the camera can catch you. We want to make sure to get everybody.
Good morning. I wanted to find out more information about your alternative discipline center. What are the qualifications for students to be enrolled in that, and is that different from a district alternative education program?
So, is this on? Can you hear me? You guys hear me? So, we have an alternative school, and that's where kids go for maybe a longer term placement. The majority of kids in our alternative school have requested placement there. They have not been placed there by an administrator. For example, we have students that may need more support or have severe anxiety in a high school with 1,400 kids in a very old building. Our hallways get super crowded. We have some kids who can't handle that, and so they ask to be placed at the alternative school for a longer placement. For the alternative suspension center, that is not an actual placement. What happens, it's housed at an alternative school. However, students are placed there for whatever term they would be suspended for. So if you previously would have been suspended for 3 days for getting into a fight, instead of being suspended for 3 days, you are sent to the alternative suspension center. We provide transportation. They receive their lunch. It's just like a regular school day, just in another building. And part of that is we've contracted with an African-American owned organization called Life Push that brings in counselors every day, and for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, they do counseling and support with their students to kind of really get into what the issues are that are going on, to support them in going back to the regular environment once they leave the alternative suspension center. So there's no specific set criteria to go other than you're in grade 6 through 12 and you would have received a discipline consequence that typically would have been a suspension, but instead of being suspended, you go to the alternative suspension center. Their teachers are using Google Classroom to provide the students with the work they would be missing while they were actually in the classroom, to keep them up to date with their work so that they're not missing that while they're out. And this way kids are not at home and in the community unsupervised, sleeping until lunchtime or playing on their phone or playing on their Xbox. Instead, they're still in school and receiving some supports while they're there. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
I was just gonna ask if there had been any plans to continue with I was curious if you were going to do the climate survey again, or if that was, to reevaluate the results.
We've done the climate survey every year since, and we're continuing to do many of the things that we implemented. We're continuing to do in our strategic plan. We've continued to hold the forums every year since we started. The survey information has gotten much better. What has made me happier along the way is when we started this and we asked the students, and they said their teachers weren't fair. We asked the question, maybe of the data spice. How many, you have 7 teachers during the day, how many of your teachers do you feel like aren't fair? And we 5 out of 7, 7 out of 7, 6 out of 7, 4 out of 7. And we've continued to ask that question every year. And so at last year's forums, we might get 1 out of 7, 2 out of 7. To me, that's a marker that we're moving in the right direction. I don't think we'll ever stop doing student forums because we have no idea what's going on in the school if we're not talking to the kids. And if you've never done a student forum, try them because you will learn so much more from your kids than the data will ever be able to tell you.
My question is for Nadia. We struggle getting information to families about meetings where there are opportunities for two-way communication. So I was wondering what strategies have worked best for you in getting the families that don't typically engage in the opportunities for their voices to be heard.
I can tell you that continues to be a struggle. As you can imagine, we're a really large district. We have built relationships with a number of our community partners. And one of the initiatives that we've actually launched, we're actually going into our second year, we call it Community Readers, where we put small libraries in barbershops, hair salons, and we're looking to expand into laundromats. You guys have an affinity for these locations. In addition to the books, we also have an information center. So what's going on in your community? So that's one avenue. We do a lot of parent link. A lot of our families are using technology. So pushing out Twitter, I want to say Facebook, but my children laugh when I say that because apparently no one uses that anymore. But our robocalls tend to be one of the methods that we reach out to a lot of families. But again, you have to opt in as a parent, either follow us on Twitter or give us your contact information. Community partners really are one of the best tools. Reaching out to our after school and our before care programs, having them give the information to families as they're picking up their children or dropping off.
Thank you. Again, I say thank you, ladies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to draw our first panel to a close. We're going to take a brief intermission of 5 minutes as we set up for our second panel. And so we will begin back in 5 minutes.